got a single digit budget, $100 rings, $1,000 cutlass, and $1 million dream. I want a 7-digit budget, 100 diamond rings, 1,000 screaming for me. That's my $1 million dream. I got a single digit budget, $100 rings, $1,000 cutlass, and $1 million dream. I want a 7-digit budget, $100 rings, 1,000 screaming for me. That's my $1 million.
There's been a common misconception what people figure out to be like a tier 0 deck. And yes, I'm at home right now in my garage waiting on them to get here to go to Super Games and everything. And like I said, there's a common misconception people confuse with the best deck and a tier 0 format. And that's what kind of want to get into kind of today. When they get here, I'm going to get Blair's input on it as well, so we can have, you know, two people discussing it and everything. Pretty much there was a point in time where Dragon Rulers reigned supreme throughout the format. And obviously with that deck, that honestly was a tier 0 format. There was one defined best deck that ran everything, and then yet there was, obviously, you're going to see, just like Teledad format, you know, all these decks, this one deck, you know, take 20 something, almost 30 spots out of a top 32 YCS or a Shonen Jump at this point in time, and the other couple would be a different deck, kind of like Glads or something along those lines. But you know, ended up being the Glads won those events. Well, it still was defined as a tier 0 format because, you know, Teledad was the best deck in the format. Same with Dragon Rulers. Dragon Rulers pretty much, you know, it was pretty much, you know, dragons and then a little bit of spell books, and then you saw like one Evil Swarm player top because, you know, he was lucky enough for them not to have the blaster to pop his own Ophion and do all that other stuff. And obviously, as you guys saw, Dragons ended up winning the national championship with Patrick Hoban, and then I believe Oliver Tomaiko ended up winning Dragon Duels with it, and then that Sheehan guy ended up winning with it with at Worlds as well. Now you're looking at Necros format. We're going to go in order here. Going to go to Necros format next. Necros is obviously the best deck of the format, 100%. Yet that wasn't a tier 0 format. Tier 0 format's pretty much defined as you're going to see, you know, 30 out of the 32 decks, you know, dominate that, and then literally over half the playing field, more or less, you know, dominate by that deck. And you really can't see my face from that angle. So we're going to go back to light here. So pretty much at this point in time, you're looking at about 20 Necros decks topping, with Necros winning, I believe, half of those events that they ended up doing very well at. And you look at it and you're like, well, Kyle, I really don't understand what you're getting at. Well, there were other decks to beat the best deck, and that in itself was the best deck, was Necros. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the Perform Agent Pals, or the MM deck that people are calling it now. It's obviously the best deck. As you see in Sydney, you know, so many of the decks ended up topping, and the deck obviously eventually ended up winning the whole thing. And you saw just a couple Cosmos. You saw Cosmos go undefeated in Swiss, which is really cool. And then other than that, you really didn't see too much over any other deck. You saw like one Mermail, and that was pretty much it at that point. You saw a couple Cosmo, and then you saw, you know, Perform Agent Pals. And that's kind of what we're looking at, the same exact thing as we were with the particular Necros format and such. We're not seeing a tier 0 format, but we're seeing a predominantly Perform Agent Pals or MM or whatever you want to call it format, where a lot of people are going to be playing this pendulum based deck that, you know, standardizes on the sorcerers and the strikes and the infinities and the Rafflesia, and that's pretty much become our you know, tier 1 meta. You can even go to the point of saying it's tier 0.5 due to the fact that, you know, you're seeing so many players thirsting over these certain cards, wanting to play this certain deck because it is the defined best deck of the format. Like I did say though, it doesn't mean it's a tier 0 format. Yeah, pretty much. I'm gonna get Blair's opinion here in a second. So
Kyle, aka Spoofy.
I'm texting while driving. Never do that.
Kyle came up with this idea. One of our subscribers had asked us, like, what's the difference between like a tier 0 format and a best deck format. I started playing in 2009, so I really didn't get like a good chance to see like the earlier decks like Teledad, DDT, Diamond Turbo, and other things like that. But from what I know, like so just take for example Dragon Rulers. Because I was definitely around during the Dragon Ruler format. That was when I was starting to get into my prime, so to say. But like the first wave of Dragon Rulers when they first came out, and then when Spellbook of Judgment came out, if looking at that, that was a best deck format. There wasn't like one definitive deck that was taking every tournament and everything. Like it would always switch back and forth. Of course, everyone knew that Dragon Rulers and Spellbooks were the best deck at that time, but it was hard to beat. But for you to beat it, you had the main deck stuff that you normally wouldn't main deck to beat the deck. But yeah, like Jalgan with Spellbooks, Divinity Symphonist for the mirror match for Dragon Rulers, and then people hate picking for Dragon Rulers, like playing Evil Swarms or just being really like teched out with their other decks if they play decks that I did not mention. But they would like, it was just like for that one, it was the best deck format. But when Ravine Dragons came out, now at that point, argue with me if you want to, Ravine Dragons was a tier 0 format. Of course they hit Dragons the first time. I think that was when they like nuked all the babies and put all the big dragons to 1. And then the Spellbook of Judgment, of course, went from 3 to 0. So spellbooks weren't really viable at that time to combat against dragons anymore. But dragons were still free. Dragons were still free with Dragon Ravine, and like pretty much letting you do anything you wanted to do with dragons. And then of course the other support that came out in the later sets at that time. Let's try and go a little further on. Let's try to take right now Pepe, or Aforementioned Pals, or Pendulum Dudes, or whatever you want to call it. If you look at this format, a lot of people are thinking that this is going to be a tier 0 format with Performance or the Pendulum deck. Looking at it, the deck is strong and the deck is free. You literally can do anything you want to. There's infinite draw power, infinite search power, and just you have access to the best XYZs in the game right now, which are rank 4s. And of course, everybody's gonna be main deck and hate for it. Your Maxis, which isn't really that good, but Veilers, Cosmos playing artifacts and everything right now to try and beat that deck. And then of course it's gonna be the same when Monarchs come out, because they have Dominion, which will be able to stop them, especially from the extra deck. And then of course playing Vanity's Fiend, try to combat them, especially some of them, period. But they're all those examples, it's not tier 0. It's gonna be a hard deck to beat, but it's not unstoppable. Of course everything is free, but you can literally do a couple things to make the deck fragile. And the deck can brick, but not as much. But just to give like a brief example of like what I feel it means to be tier 0. When we say tier 0, we're saying that even with your teched out hate or whatever in your other decks, there's literally nothing you can do almost to stop that deck. Just think back to Teledad if you played during that format. I've seen people play like old format Teledad, like at my house, at other friends' houses and everything, and literally that deck is free. Like that deck is back for the deck for what it was at that time. That deck was literally free, and you can do anything and stop anything. Judgment was a card, like if you played a deck that was trying to hate on it, just Judgment everything away, drop Dark Arm, drop Stardust, Goyo. If like back in that time it was free, like that was tier 0. Like you literally can't do anything to stop that deck at that time. So it even got to a point where they had to emergency ban some cards to make that deck try to be fair. But like this best deck formats, it's gonna be a good deck, but it won't be the only good deck. Like it's gonna win. It's gonna take majority of the top spots in major events. It's gonna win a vast majority of those set events. But there's room for other decks to slip in and win as well. Just think for right now, Cosmos gonna be playing artifacts. Their Cosmojo trap card is actually not bad. It's a non-targetable banishing, which is insane. And then of course, with even though Pepe can make Igniter and stuff really easily, if we don't have access to it, it's really hard to get over Dark Destroyer. It's really hard. It's a really hard card to deal with, especially with it not being able to be targeted. So that's just my take on like what it is to me, like what I think is a tier 0 format or a best deck format, and we'll be going into a best deck format definitely.